Morning everybody. Well, the sun's out today after it poured with rain all day yesterday. We've got clear blue sky, and I think we're going to attempt to get the bus into Clitheroe today. Have a look round there. I'll film that later, but meanwhile we're going back to 1966, and one day we were on exercise, harboured up in a wood, and we all went to a guest house somewhere in a little village on the edge of this wood. And well, I got into a bit of an argument with a lad and the upshot of it all was the van left with the truck carrying everybody left without me, and I had to find my own way back. And it was pitch black, and I had to find my way back through these woods to the camp. And there were wild boar in Germany. I've never encountered wild boar before that. And I was told that they had fluorescent green eyes. They had green eyes that glowed in the dark. So I was mindful of this going through this wood in pitch black, and I did see this luminous green, and I stopped and watched for this luminous green to move. I stayed there quite a bit, it didn't move, and I moved nearer and it still didn't move, and eventually I got right up to it, and it was on the bark of a tree, and I literally picked it up, this bark on this tree, and it was literally luminous green. Whether the guys thought that were wild pigs or not, I don't know, but what was that? Does any of you lot out there know what that was? Anyway, I carried on through this wood, and all of a sudden these guys leapt on me. Oh, it was the SAS. It was a NATO exercise and they were involved in it, and they dragged me into this tent and interrogated me. They accused me of being a spy. They could have picked better, couldn't they, army, couldn't they? And I think that's probably the conclusion they came to, and all I'd give them was my name, rank and number. That's all I'd say to them, my name, rank and number. And eventually they did let me go. But the trouble was, I'd heard from blokes that the SAS caught a fella and stripped him naked and tied him to a tree against Main Road. Well, I was really hoping that didn't happen, and thankfully it didn't. And the next episode on this exercise, this scheme was, we were all given as rifle, well, we always had as rifles, SLRs, self-loading rifles, and we had a clip full of blanks, and they gave us some thunder flashes, and took us to this place, just a little mound of earth, and to hide behind, and they said, you need to stay here, and some tanks are going to come this way, and your job is to stop them. Well, these thunder flashes, they were like a stick about this long, and they had like a striker on the side attached to them that you pulled and struck it and got rid of it, and they did go. In fact, we'd once put a tin helmet on one and it blew it out of sight. So you wouldn't want to be too near one when they went off. So we had to throw these at the tanks. Anyway, we waited all through night, and we got bored, and one of the guys says, oh, I'm going to clean my gun. And I said, are you sure? You ought to be doing that. I mean, they might come any minute. No, I'll be all right. Anyway, I thought I'd have a go with mine as well. Well, you cleaned a gun with what they called a pull-through, which was a little a tube of metal on the end of a cord, and at the other end of the cord were a slit in it, and you put this piece of material called a 4x2 in this slit, and I think it was impregnated with oil, and you slid the metal tube down the barrel, pulled it out the other end and pulled it through, hence called a pull through, and it cleaned and oiled the barrel. Well, I couldn't find a piece of 4x2 for mine. I don't know where it was, so I tied a knot in the end of the cord and pulled it through, and it got stuck. It got stuck halfway down the barrel. So I had a piece of pull-through sticking out end of my barrel. So that was me finished with my gun. It couldn't be fired. I couldn't get it out. And eventually, these tanks come, and one of the lads struck this thunder flash and dropped it. Dropped it right where we were, and we all run like hell away from this thunder flash, and it went off. So we more or less blew us set up. So that was our part in the war. So that was that. Well, as time passed by, I really hankered to go on the tanks. They were always at the sharp end. All these battles, they were always up at the sharp end. And I was fed up with being in support in the B echelons. So when they introduced the Ark, I volunteered to man it, and there were 3 of us manned the first Ark that came. And I'll put some photographs up of what we had. Were bridge layers, which are like a tank that carried a bridge on its back, and Averies. Averies had a stubby gun on them for firing Hesh rounds. Hesh, sorry girls, this will be a bit boring. The Hesh rounds, high explosive squash head. That's what Hesh stood for. And they were for aiming at pillboxes, bridge abutments, concrete structures, reinforced concrete structures. And they also had a dozer blade on the front for dozing causeways, and a fascine cradle as well. Now, a fascine is a massive great bundle of wood, round wood, which is placed on with a crane onto the fascine. So the driver, when he's driving, is literally looking at a narrow space between the bottom of the fascine and the top of the dozer blade. Pretty skillful job driving them things. And the idea was that when an enemy retreated, they dug tank ditches to stop the tanks. And the idea was that you launch these fascines into the tank ditch and dozed a causeway across it so that tanks could get across the tank ditches. So that's what we had up until the Ark coming. The Ark was a bridge that drove into the river. He literally drove it into the river, and it launched a bridge. The thing about a bridge layer is when it launched, it's stuck up in air, it breaks the skyline, and it can be seen for miles, which was one of its drawbacks. Whereas the Ark, it didn't break the skyline. It were all folded up, and it unfolded and dropped like that. So when I went on the Ark, I went as a radio operator, and the radio operator sat in the belly of the tank. It was just painted in silver paint inside, well, very low, just above your head when you were sat down there. and you could see the driver's seat. And I could see Ray Stowe, I could see him driving, and I used to watch him driving that tank. And it was a sight to behold. I meant no wonder we were knackered, because you never stopped. It was the busiest thing in the world, driving a tank. You know, I mean, on the road it would crash gearbox, gear lever in between your legs, and the pedals were so stiff, so heavily sprung. You just jabbed the pedals. You couldn't keep your foot down on it. And to watch Ray going up and down the gearbox and using stick changes cross country, it was a marvel to behold. Because when you change gear on land, you double clutch, jab, take it out of gear and into third and 4-speed box. But when you were on the mud, you couldn't do that. It'd bring it to an halt. It takes so long to change gear. So what you did was you had to pull the stick right at the same time as you jabbed the clutch and pushed it into gear. You had to do it simultaneously, and as you pulled the stick, slowed the gearbox down and it went in gear. So that's how you change gear across country with them. So that's what I did. I went on to the Arcs as a wireless operator until eventually I went to Bovington and did my driver training. Right, I don't know how much time that's taken. I'll have a look. That's the bridge layer. That's the Avery. That's the Avery. That's me stood in front of the Arc. It's in Chatham Museum.